Welcome to Kill the Cat. In this episode, we're talking about one of the most memed movies of the millennium, The Emperor's New Groove, and how this trope-filled buddy comedy uses simplicity to entertain. Obviously, spoilers ahead, but this movie is 20 years old and all over the internet, so we're pretty sure you'll be okay. Now, enjoy the episode. Welcome to this episode of Kill the Cat. Today we are talking about a very fun film, one of my favorites. I think I've watched it at least 5 times this year, not in prep for this episode. Oh, that is The Emperor's New Groove.
I've never heard of it. Is it good?
It's all right.
It's okay?
It's okay.
All right. No, so basically, little backstory to this episode. Me and my housemate, through the lockdown of 2021, went back and started watching old Disney movies because we have Disney Plus, and we came across The Emperor's New Groove. And I messaged Ibby being like, lol, I'm watching The Emperor's New Groove. And then Ibby's like, I want to watch The Emperor's New Groove. And then Ibby came back to me, he's like, do you want to do an episode? I was like, yes.
Yeah. Basically what we're talking about today is the idea of keeping it simple. There's a lot of background to this movie, but for many reasons that we'll go into, it had to end up being quite a simple, tropey buddy comedy. And that sort of worked infinitely in its favor, and it's just kind of blown up as this quotable, memeable movie from the 2000-2001
Yeah, I've heard it called a cult classic. I'm not sure if it fits that title, but when I was doing my research,
like it's too popular to be a cult classic.
Especially like we're both millennials, and like it's just such a millennial movie.
Yeah, unless the cult is millennials.
Just millennials are a cult. That's our big takeaway for this episode. Basically, a quick rundown. Look, I've pieced this together from like YouTube and what I found online. Essentially, this movie did not start off The Emperor's New Groove.
What?
Not at all. It started off being a movie called Kingdom of the Sun, and it was this big like epic tale, and it was about like Incan myths combined with the Prince and the Pauper. Cusco was named Manco, and he swapped places with Pacha, who was originally played by Owen Wilson.
Amazing.
So I'll just let everyone sit with that idea for a while.
I mean, for what Pacha was in that version.
Yeah, definitely
I think
not
actually David Spade
Pacha,
and Owen Wilson can play off each other quite well.
One day. Live action remake.
We don't need that for this.
In the original, Yzma was trying to coerce Pacha into her evil plan of banishing the sun, which she believed robbed her of her beauty by summoning the god of death. There was so much going on. Like, Pacha had a romance with the emperor's fiancé. Manco had to learn humility from a female llama herder. There was a 10,000-year-old rock helping Yzma, and it ended with Pacha lassoing the sun back into position. So even just from that description, hopefully it comes
mythological.
across. Very mythological. It ended up really convoluted. The pacing was really weird. And it just tested really, really badly with audiences. Well, the test audiences hadn't been released. But they started making notes that there were like short, funny sequences in this film. And that's what the people watching it were responded to.
This was also at a time where Disney had just released Pocahontas and The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which had not done very well. And so they were kind of worried that these big epics just weren't what people wanted anymore.
Yeah.
And especially since we'd had like Aladdin and Toy Story starting to come out. Like Pixar was now on the scene doing some really cool stuff. And people were resonating a lot with that.
Yeah, so we were like kind of coming up to the end of the Disney Renaissance at this point. And look, Roger Allers was originally in charge of this, who did The Lion King. And there was like a phrase that went around the studio was like, remember The Lion King, like he's amazing, he's going to make it work. But this movie essentially spun its wheels for 4 years, didn't get anywhere. Mark Dindal had been brought onto the project to like give it a more comedic taste. Yeah, and essentially the executives went, it's not working. They split up Allers and Dindal, and they're like, each of you have 2 weeks to come and pitch to us how to fix this movie that's costing us so much money.
Because they'd already started animation.
Yeah.
Like they'd done all the character design, they'd gone through the ring with animation. Like there was a lot of the scenes already done, a lot of the voice work already done. Sting had been working on the music for this for ages. His wife had produced a documentary about this.
Which is why there's like a really out of place Sting song.
As the credits
and
song.
you're like, why is this here?
Yeah.
Because Sting wrote music for this big epic that never happened.
Fact. So last time we watched this, I was mentioning the fact that Cusco, rather than destroying the thing, had just used like the waterfalls and that as his water park thing. Sting was apparently the reason that happened.
Because he was like, it's anti-environmental for Cusco to still build his like Custopia.
Theme park.
Custopia?
Cuscotopia.
That's the one. So it came back after 2 weeks. Alice was still a big dramatic epic, and Dindal basically stripped nearly everything out of the film and was like, okay, it's a slapstick comedy. This is what it would look like.
Buddy comedy.
Yes. And the executive just laughed all the way through. Alice left the film, from what I read, on good terms with Dindal, but was kind of like, it's not my movie and I don't want to work on it, which, you know what, understandable.
There was a interview that came out later where he was like, he was a bit upset because enough of it was kept that you couldn't then go back and make the other film without sort of stepping on the intellectual property, which is
is really sad,
but is also part of the industry, right?
That's how it works.
Yeah.
So they just went into the writer's room. They got 18 months essentially to put this film together.
They cut a lot of the cast, kept David Spade, Eartha Kitt, I think. I think everyone else was replaced.
Everything else was replaced. Kronk was added as a character.
Yes.
And they basically, like I said, they stripped it back to bare bones. There's no script for this movie. I tried to find it. I'm like, there's no script. They didn't write one. They just had little
they
scenes and stuff.
storyboarded it, didn't they?
Yeah, we're getting into our writer's room stuff now. But and sadly, it still didn't do very well at the box office.
It was competing with 102 Dalmatians, which was this massive sequel that they were plugging. And then what else? The Grinch
How the Grinch Stole Christmas just beat out both movies. And Emperor's New Groove kind of ended the Disney Renaissance.
Yeah.
Because they lost a lot of money. And I think this is where the cult classic idea comes on. It found a second life on home video. Now, everyone of our generation I know knows this movie, can quote this movie. It's found life on TikTok with little things, have been trending sounds.
Yeah.
And it's great, and we watch it all the time.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that really make this movie work. The first one is that, the formula is really simple. It is all tropes, and especially cartoon tropes. They kept all the things that were developed in terms of the aesthetics and the design, and I think that gives it a real sense of uniqueness amongst other buddy comedy cartoons.
The animation is crazy.
It's really good.
We're saying how it doesn't feel like it's aged badly.
No,
this movie,
watching
in terms
it
of
now,
animation.
I'm I could see something of this quality being made today and being perfectly fine.
And just all the crazy things in the palace, everything is really high up.
Yeah.
So they use crazy ways to get around, and there's one where Cusco has to come off his throne and he rides a big rope down because there's no stairs.
Well, the stairs are just ridiculously steep. But yeah, and I think you touched on this, but Emperor's New Groove was also just kind of born in the perfect generation. The millennials watched it as kids, and now we're adults and making memes. It's kind of one of our go-to sources for memes.
So many memes, mostly Kronk, but
I mean, he is the lovable himbo.
He is the ultimate himbo.
Yeah,
and this was really ahead of its time. We had movies later Megamind and Storks, which do similar things. But again, from what I could gather from my research, this kind of humor didn't quite exist. Yeah. And it's why Disney didn't really know how to market it. But yeah, it definitely paved the way. Shrek came out similar time.
It was, the year after. I think.
Yeah. It's just all millennial culture just based on the Emperor's New Groove.
Millennial culture, I am convinced, is just movies from 2000, 2001.
That would make a lot of sense.
Yeah. So those two, 2001 was one of the biggest box office years. I looked at a thing a while back. Basically, if you adjust for inflation, every box office year basically hits about $11 billion brought in, except for last year and this year, which were, I think, $4 billion and $3 billion respectively.
There was a panini, or a panorama, as TikTok likes to call it.
Yes, a big panorama.
Yes.
Interrupted the movie industry. With the exception of 2001, which instead of being 11 billion once adjusted for inflation, is at somewhere 14 billion. It brought in a whole bunch more money because there were just all these classic movies that came out around the time. There was this one, there was Shrek, there was Rugrats in Paris, there was, all these big merchandising ones. I think Lion King 2 might have been at that time as well. Might have been the year after.
Who else had a crush on Kovu? I mean, I feel a lot of men talk about Nala as just to get a bit weird for a second. An awakening. And I feel for a lot of girls, it was Kovu. He was the first, brooding emo boy that we thought we could fix. It was him and Zuko. And now we've moved on to like Loki and Bucky Barnes, but that's where it started.
Yeah.
That's where I think it started.
They're all the same character.
Yes. And we will take it every time.
So this movie works. Fans love it. People love it. It's still part of the cultural zeitgeist even 20 years later. Why don't we talk a little bit about sort of some of the how-tos for, like, how do you make things that are simple? How do you make things that are efficient? How do you do that? You know, how do you pitch something that big in 2 weeks? Like, that's a task.
I actually think there's like a really big benefit to like short-term projects. I think sometimes you can get very in your head if something is really big or you know it's going to take a really long time and it's like hard to get started. But if you have 2 weeks to do something, it's why we get films made at film school, because we have deadlines.
It's funny. I worked on like 30 films in film school. I think I worked on about as many after film school.
Yeah, which was a scary number of years ago.
Yeah.
So we actually talked about this quite a lot in our Middleditch and Schwartz episode of how to tell a story of the basics of character, plot, and structure.
Yeah. Like, I love to look at the writer's room itself as well. And, like, you're almost improving when you're in the writer's room, especially when you've got a team of people working on something. It's that thing of, like, saying yes and. But I can't imagine another way of doing something like this in 2 weeks to get a script out. It's like you have to be just saying yes to every idea. And you feel it with the jokes that are brought in. Like, there's just ridiculous things. Like, why can Kronk talk to squirrels? You know, they find their moments, they find their comedic moments, and then they just draw a straight line between two of them and say, what's the quickest way there?
I love that approach so much.
Yeah.
Just, like you said, like the squirrel thing. Okay, we need Kronk to be able to find Cusco. Well, a squirrel saw him earlier, and Kronk can talk to squirrels. Awesome. Let's go.
Yeah. And then you need to set up that Cusco had seen the squirrel before. So that's how he gets chased by panthers. Like, it's, yeah, you draw these straight lines between your moments and they create more moments at other points and eventually everything works together. And if it doesn't, you just acknowledge it and move on. You know, how'd you get here before us? I don't know. By all accounts, it doesn't make any sense.
I think you get one of those. They do that once. Fair. And it's near the end.
It's Act 3, and it's like, we're moving into Act 3, and we know, like, we just need to go, move ahead. You had put in your notes, like, one of the other things is just finding a clear tone and sticking to it.
Yeah, I guess, like, when you're, like, yes-anding with a group of people, like, you do find that tone. I actually also had in my notes D&D logic.
Yep.
Where D&D logic is, like, we're constantly yes-anding each other, or at least you should be at a great table. But you still have to roll the dice.
Yeah.
To see and if you fail, you still go with it.
Yeah.
They actually went like even crazier than this. Like things like they had like live footage of like a shuttle launch. Yeah, like they put in there at some point. There was something about a sequence with Adam West and like an army of crows or something like that. So look,
what?
They did way crazier things than actually ended up in the movie. Which, like, it's fine. When you're yes-anding, you're not going to use every
exactly.
idea.
And that's the idea. You create first and then you trim later.
Yeah, and if you have that atmosphere of, like, you can say anything and it's fine, you're going to get amazing ideas, like squirrels who do balloon animals and trampoline salesmen and everything else that makes this movie amazing.
One of my things that I like to say is that shit ideas make really good fertilizer for good ideas.
I get that.
Yeah.
I understood that.
So why don't we talk about how do you make simple characters?
Simple characters, yeah. So they took away all, essentially, the complex characters from, like, this big epic, and we boiled them down into... We essentially have a core cast of 4.
Yeah.
There's other, like, minor characters we can talk about, but, like, the selfish rich guy who we know will be, like, selfless by the end of the movie.
Yeah. We know the character arc for every one of these characters.
Yeah.
You know, in the first 10 minutes of the movie.
And that's absolutely fine because it's surprising how he gets there.
Yeah.
The end isn't a surprise, but the journey is. That's a good quote.
Yeah. So there was a study done a couple of years ago about the effects of things being spoiled for people. I might have told you about this, but basically they gave people spoilers for what was about to happen, like the twist or something in a movie that they were about to watch. And the people who knew the twist, like they had more of a response to the movie. And basically what they kind of came to as their like hypothesis from it was that like knowing where you're going to get to makes you more excited about what could potentially happen in the journey than if you'd have to just sit and accept the journey.
True, yeah.
And the anticipation is more emotionally charged than the experiencing.
And that's why we like genre, right? Like, because we know how, like, a superhero movie or a Western or even a horror, like, we know where those movies are going to go.
Yeah.
We're okay to sit down to a horror knowing everyone might die. We're not going to go to, with the exception of Infinity War, we're not going to go to a Marvel movie and be like, cool, everyone's going to die by the end. That would not be a good movie.
But that was a twist on genre, and we knew that there was a part 2 coming.
We knew there was a part 2 where they were going to win.
Yeah.
We didn't know how they were going to get there.
No.
Actually, so many people were talking about Endgame and they're like, oh, it's going to be boring because everyone's coming back because they've announced all these sequels. I'm like, yes, we know they're coming back, but it's surprising how they're going to get there.
Yeah, and it was. It was brilliant how they got there. And
I loved the time heist. It was so fun.
Time heist.
Time heist. Characters.
Yeah.
Simple character design.
Yeah, so having your 4 characters, giving them clear goals is one of the big things that's going to instantly make you latch onto your characters. So Yzma wants the throne and to kill Kuzco so she can get it.
Yes.
That's she is evil villain. We get that. There's nothing more to say about that.
Why does she hate Kuzco? Because he fired her for being old. There is one line that I actually didn't pick up until this watch, which actually makes the whole thing really sad, which Kuzco was like, Yzma practically raised me.
Yeah.
Which is really dark.
Yeah.
When you think about that.
But also then you're like, how could he end up this way?
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
I actually think Kuzco turned out pretty good considering if Yzma raised him. I'm sure there's a lot of fanfics about Kuzco's tragic childhood somewhere.
Yes.
So we have ultra evil Yzma. She's just purple and pointy.
Yes, I wrote the same thing.
Yes.
She's purple and pointy, which is like just the trope of every good Disney villain queen, basically.
Yeah.
Like Maleficent and
Dr. Facilier from The Princess and the Frog.
Yeah.
The evil stepmother from
That's who I'm
Snow
thinking.
White.
Yeah.
And even Lady Tremaine from Cinderella is she's dressed in a lot of purple.
Yeah.
Purple and green is evil in Disney.
Yes.
It's actually why when Ariel has her big dress reveal, it's pink. They've changed that now, so now in marketing she's more teal.
Yeah.
But Ariel's color scheme for her like tail was purple and green.
Yeah.
And they couldn't give her that Disney dress at that time. Because that was the
evil
villain.
color. Yeah. And Ursula was
And Ursula, yeah.
black and purple. Yeah.
Oh, that's such an ugly dress. Sorry, Ariel. And then we have
and then
Pacha.
Yeah, Pacha.
I've just realised is very round.
Yes, he's very round to
as opposed
contrast
to Yzma.
Yeah.
And he's Kuzco's foil. He's selfless, he's caring, he's everything Kuzco isn't.
He wants Kuzco to change his mind. That's his goal, basically. He wants to save his village, but he's not okay with leaving Kuzco to die in order to do it. Like, he wants to do it the right way, and that's by having Kuzco go through a change of character.
I really love just the trope of these two characters don't get along, but they need something from each other, and therefore have to work together.
AKA
amazing.
Every buddy comedy.
Every buddy comedy.
That is buddy comedy.
It's a buddy comedy.
Yeah.
And then along the way, they become best friends.
Yeah.
It's the best.
Exactly. And the other thing with, like, goals is that Kronk doesn't really have too many goals, but he is stupid so that the plot can progress.
Which is amazing.
Like, every major plot turning point happens because Kronk does something stupid.
Mixes up the poison. Also, I love that just, like, why is he a llama? Because the scrumpled up, like, thing looks like a llama. It's a skull.
Someone drew a poison, like, the top of the poison on the back of that paper so that it could, like, scroll. Like, how did that...
Just amazing.
Yeah.
You pointed it out to me for the first time. I'd never seen this, that the plant Yzma chucks her drink into.
Oh, yeah, then turns into a llama cactus.
Yes. Which I'd never seen before.
It's so good.
There's a scene where, because he's lied to Yzma, because he's like, Kuzco's dead. I also love the idea of, like, we need...
If he came back. It would be really awkward.
We need Kronk to not actually, like, kill Kuzco so the plot can happen.
Yeah.
But we need to see, like, his thought process. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the angel and devil comes from. Like... So we can see Kronk's thought process.
Yeah, you're not thinking of turning around now, big guy.
Kronk theme music is just
Oh, yes.
peak movie making. But yeah, sorry, he's lied about it to Yzma. And there's not some like convoluted way of how Yzma finds out Kuzco is still alive.
Yeah.
Just Kronk is just a really bad liar and Yzma's smart, so she catches him. Like going back to that like A to B fastest path. Kronk just messes up and Yzma's like, okay, here we go.
Yeah. So Kronk is simple so that the plot can progress, and simple characters is kind of what we love.
Simple, likable.
Yeah,
characters.
likable is also, I think, important in a movie like this. Like, Kuzco is likable, even though he's a jerk,
Yeah.
because he's very charming.
He's very entertaining. It's that like Tony Stark kind of idea. And also like we meet Kuzco and then we almost immediately meet Yzma.
Who is worse.
Yes, and we're like, okay.
But she's kind of equally entertaining. Like,
She's
everyone is very entertaining.
Well, she's the smartest person in any room she's in. And we like watching those characters.
Yeah.
She's also Eartha Kitt, so
Yeah.
how can you go wrong? Pacha is very funny and sweet, but he's not like preachy. Like he's willing to push a little bit to get what he wants. Side note, I really like Pacha's family. I actually think they're one of the best movie families who's like not central to the plot.
It's a healthy family dynamic that is charming and not completely cliche, even though
They feel
this
like
is...
real. They like you walk into that and like, yeah, this is a family that exists when they're not on screen.
Which is really impressive for a movie that, in the best possible way, it's like a lot of these characters are pretty one-dimensional.
Yeah.
But this family still feels somewhat real.
And that little scene of like when they have the nightmares.
Yes.
I love how the kids have personalities. Again, it sounds simple, but it's actually one of the notes I give quite frequently in scripts. You'll often have like a couple or a single parent where the kid is often like a plot device or the stakes. I'm like, the kid, I don't care that they're only 6 or 7. They also need to like feel like a real person with a real personality.
Kids are people too.
Kids are people too. And if you put just what you think like a standard 6-year-old is in a script, they don't feel real. And then you can go watch The Emperor's New Groove and see how these kids
who
feel
are
real.
not on screen for very long. Like,
No.
they really have 2 scenes. They have a few scenes, but it's when Pacha comes home, it's the nightmares, which is, you know, just there as a way to get between 2 moments with Kuzco and Pacha. And then when Yzma comes to visit.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like, we see them at the end for the happy final song. That's all they do.
And they're so memorable.
Yeah.
I think the line that really like cements that family for me is when like the kids are like, oh, do we, like mum says we have to go to bed, but do we have to? And Pacha's like, no, you can stay up as long as you're okay with me and mummy saying how much we love each other.
Yeah.
And they're like, ew, gross, and they run to bed. And I'm like, perfect. Yes, just family
What a
dynamic.
snapshot.
So what have we got? We have simple but likable characters with good arcs
Good arcs and clear goals.
Yes.
Simple, clear goals. Which I think is just a good, like, if you can find one clear goal for your character, I think that just makes writing the character and playing the character if you're an actor or, you know, trying to develop that character so much simpler. I think to, you know, D&D, because that's when I actually play characters. But the character I played in your campaign, he had a very clear goal. He basically wanted to start up a bunch of libraries.
And I kept stopping him from going to libraries.
And it's like, that's a very simple goal, but it gave me a really great sense of how to play the character, how to use the character, how to write for the character, even writing the backstory to get to that. Like, yeah, everything just kind of became simple because I had a clear goal.
And that wants versus needs things, like Kuzco's goal is to get back to the palace to turn back into a human. And that's what he's doing like the entire time. And then you hit Act 3, which is wants versus needs. I put in my notes, this is actually super high stakes when you spell it out.
Yeah.
He can have his human body or he can save Pacha's life. And when he chooses Pacha, like that's the heart of your movie,
Yeah,
right?
that's him. He has changed and he has completed his internal arc.
Yes. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
he has friends now.
Yeah.
And in the end, he gets adopted into the family and he gets...
He gets his own poncho.
Yes, with a llama on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Why don't we talk about plot? So I mentioned this before, but one of the things that this movie kind of does is just, it has moments and it draws a straight line between them. And it's just, what's the joke that takes us from this moment to this moment? Doesn't matter how silly it is. It can be a squirrel with a balloon. That's okay. It can be them careening off a waterfall. That's okay.
And it gets more ridiculous as it goes on.
Until I think the last major one we have is the trampoline.
At that point, you're like, yeah, sure, whatever.
was one of the funniest jokes in the like.
That, and then Yzma's about to win, and then Kronk with the trapdoor.
Yeah.
But they do that for the small moments. And then the big climax, which is Pacha and Cusco linking arms to walk up the building to get the potion, and then Cusco saving Pacha's life, is set up. That's a payoff. They don't fudge that one. They give us proper stakes and payoff.
No, and they're actually quite good at the setup and callback throughout. Like, a lot of films, the kind of rule is you set something up, you remind the audience that it's there, and then you use it to pay off later on. This film tends to do just a setup and a callback, but that's okay because it's quite fast-paced. But, like, the Angels and Devils, highly memorable. Only appear twice.
I thought that, rewatching it, I thought these guys were in it way more. No, that's just too
They're
soon.
there when Cusco is in the little river thing, and they're there when he needs to choose if he's going to cut the cord to drop the chandelier on Yzma, or if he's going to kill Pacha and Cusco.
Yeah.
That's it. It's the joke about big guy and an older woman. Was she scary beyond all reason?
Yes.
Yeah. That happens twice. Once in like Act 1 and once in Act 3. Them working together to climb is like, we've been talking about this a bit in our episodes, but the idea of like using Act 2 to establish what happens in Act 3. So when you get to Act 3, they can just use it. And so in Act 2, they have to figure out, who's right. Are they stepping, even though they both use their own right foot? They have to figure out how they get the extra height to grab the thing. They work that all out in Act 2 so that as soon as we get to Act 3, they see the potions up there. They see there's a path to climb up. They just look at each other, nod, and they're off and away.
If you want to see a bad example of this, this is what I think the worst movie of 2021 was. And I watched 2021 Cinderella. So there was a Ryan Reynolds movie that came out this year called Free Guy.
Oh, don't say that.
I'm sorry, I'm about to spoil a small moment in Act 3. We won't ruin the whole movie. But, like, he's fighting the big bad, and it's the climbing moment, It should be a payoff. But instead of setting this up, what he does, because he's in a video game world, he summons Captain America's shield. Marvel has not been mentioned. The shield has not been mentioned. It's not a big character moment. It's purely a reference so they can cut away to Chris Evans having a reaction. And also that, like, cutaway comedy is not established in the movie at all.
Well,
to that extent.
I don't know. I feel like we can go on.
That's okay. And then he draws out a lightsaber, and, like, the joke is, haha, Marvel and Star Wars. I hated it so much. I hated it more than I should hate. Something that doesn't matter at all.
It's a movie for teenage boys. Kat, you are not a teenage boy.
Thank God. But it really annoyed me.
It wasn't a good payoff for what had been established in the movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Emperor's New Groove does it very well.
I remember the last time we watched it, because we watched it together like a week ago, which we don't often do for these things. We tend to prep separately and then come together for a conversation.
We're busy humans, but yes.
But there's a lot of really genuine dramatic tension in the diner.
Yes. We were talking about this, like... Okay, so there's like skits and stuff, but it's usually moving the plot forward or that scene, which has a lot of tension. Like, it's fun, but it's fun because it's so tense because they just keep missing each other.
Yeah.
Which, again, is a great trope that more people should use.
Yes. And, like, when they've got the menus and it's like Cusco and Yzma are, like, facing each other, they just have to put their menus down at the same time. And then at one point they do, but they both look to the side. And
yes, and, like, going through the rotating door... Kronk not picking up its two different voices because he's Kronk.
Yeah, until later that night. Yzma!
Just the tent setup. Yeah. Yzma in her massive tent, and then Kronk's little tent.
Yeah, pitching a tent.
Yeah, some adult jokes in this movie.
Yeah.
Which is also fun. I think they should be in every kid's movie. Just something for the parents to enjoy, and the people watch it when they're older.
Yeah, 20 years later.
Yes.
How is this 20 years old? So that's plot, that's character. The other thing we had was just, how to tell simple jokes. Simple comedy. So, we've said this a bunch of times, but tropes.
Tropes, man,
tropes
they're so
are
good.
really good in a film like this because
Not cliches, tropes.
Yes.
Big difference.
Because they are things that we know we enjoy seeing. As long as you're unique with them and you're fitting them into your world and not kind of forcing them, they can be really fun. Like, the whole buddy comedy structure, like, from A to Z, this is tropes. It's two people who are completely different, don't like each other, forced to go on a road trip together to solve their goals. Yzma and Kronk are also a buddy duo as well, who are chasing them. Completely opposed, completely different, forced to go on an adventure together. You know, the tropes of the shoulder angel, there's the secret lab, there's the kiss of
Cusco totally knows about.
Yeah.
Again, I just forgot that, and just rewatching it for this, I was like, oh, he
knew about that. Yeah.
So there's just a roller coaster.
Yeah.
There's a roller coaster to the lab.
Yeah. I think it's literally so we can have Yzma very intense and Kronk like, wee!
Pull the lever, Kronk.
And that joke, like, it's, you know, it's the classic pulling a lever.
Yeah.
And they just make it the funniest thing. Wrong lever! But yeah, the chandelier falling, the going over the huge waterfall. It's tropes through and through.
And then sometimes they mess with them, just talking about the chandelier thing.
Yeah, it doesn't work. And then she pulls her own lever and Kronk goes falling down a trapdoor.
Yeah, she's like, that usually works. And even when, like, when Pacha's, like, swinging in to, like, save Cusco and he misses.
The panthers just go out of the way.
Yeah. And I think just, like, make little moments more fun, which is something I wish more films and more scripts did. For example, like, okay, Yzma and Kronk need to have a conversation. They're going to do jump rope with the kids.
Yes.
And Yzma's going to do cartwheels.
Yeah.
It's still progressing the plot. It's like an important conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah.
But they're just doing jump rope at the same time. And it's not the thing of like, oh, they're going to do a funny jump rope skit now.
No, it's the thing that is kind of just happening in the background and you're kind of not fully aware of it. Like her cartwheels, you very easily miss that because that's just a like animation thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is all fine because they establish a logic of the world. So this is why I hate CinemaSins.
Get ready for a rant, folks.
I'll keep it short, but like essentially what really annoys... It's not really so much CinemaSins itself as people who think that's proper film critique.
Film bros.
Film bros, a lot. And like Screen Rant does it too. And they point out like plot holes, which aren't really plot holes because they work within the logic of the world. So one that really annoyed me was like, oh, Black Widow was like a terrible movie because she couldn't have survived all that. I'm like, it's a superhero movie. Like, in the rules of her world, yes, she can. It's genre convention. If you put this through like a CinemaSins like feedback loop, it would ruin the movie. And yeah, I just think there needs to be more like, there's an internal structure to movies and you set your own set of rules. Mm-hmm. And if you don't break them, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you get kind of one break, right? Like, it's the one lie that you get to tell.
Yeah, when they were like, oh, it makes no sense how we got here.
Yeah.
But also, that doesn't come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, we see, like, the triangles following them and stuff.
And they just shrug and keep
They're
going.
like, oh, that's happening. Okay. It works within the logic of the world. Mm-hmm. That's allowed to happen.
Yeah.
Trampoline salesman and Kronk opening a trapdoor at the exact right time. That's allowed to happen. If Yzma gets thrown out of a house, she's going to go down a hill on a wheelbarrow and go through like honey and feathers and become a piñata. That's fine.
She stops right at the right moment on the rope, already hanging, so that the kids can hit her. That's fine.
It's cartoony and it's allowed. So yeah, I think just keeping your internal logic is really important, and you can be crazy as you want within that. Podcast I listened to called Welcome to Night Vale actually does this, and Night Vale's like pretty out there, and their rule is like, we can add anything to this world, but the moment it's added, it's canon forever.
Yeah.
So they had a thing of like writing utensils are illegal, and they realized later on that's a really annoying thing to have. So they turned that into like, it's illegal, but it's like weed illegal.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so like
everyone does it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's like a fun thing.
I just remembered some other tropes.
Go for it.
Crocodiles in the river below them.
Yes, and the scorpions.
Also, like, the cliff crumbling away and, like, taking someone with it who gets saved. The bridge collapsing.
Oh my god, the way the bridge collapses is just my favourite thing.
Just, like, the whole them fighting, like, and just the close-ups are like, bonk.
Small side note on character. I like that Cusco isn't a wimp. Like, he's naive and he's, like, he's arrogant and, like, naive enough.
And he can't quite back himself up. Like,
no.
But
I wouldn't say he's brave, but he's not, like, crying and, like, asking Pacha to save him, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's not a damsel in distress.
No, just going back to that, like, likability factor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so why don't we talk about some takeaways then?
Yes.
What have you learned from this?
Yeah. Okay, so first thing I want to say is don't go into a movie planning to be like, oh, we're just going to do funny skits and like make it up as we go along.
Yeah, look,
I've seen that done. I've done that. I've been on both sides of that. Don't do it. Like, have a plan.
Yeah.
And look, but that plan can be, this is, as we said, it's a buddy cop. It's really simple hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
Get those plot points down and then, yeah, just yes and. And I think also the lesson of the original movie, what was lost. Sometimes if something is feeling like really big and really convoluted, like obviously these guys got 2 weeks, but like put it down, go for a walk, stop trying to force it, and yeah, don't get too attached to what you originally thought it was, because maybe it can be something even better.
Yeah, let the story tell you what it needs to be. I think the flip side to that, though, is keep what you can. I don't think this movie would have done anywhere near as well if it didn't have, like, the design and the aesthetic that it actually carried, because it separated it from a lot of the other Disney movies that were out. It's way more cartoony, but, like, yeah, just everything about it felt different, even though it was Disney.
Yeah, a lot of that ink and, like, research really made it into, like, the design.
That's the parts you're not going to try and redo, right?
No.
Like, when you're rewriting the script, it's like, let's not rebuild all our characters.
Just strip them down to basics.
Yeah. Simple goals, simple characters. Add on to that.
And if you think that's bad, that you need a super complex character, make a simple one and come play D&D and see how quickly they become complex.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well.
That was a really fun episode.
Yeah. It's a fun movie.
It is a fun movie.
Thanks for listening to this episode on The Emperor's New Groove and how to keep things simple. Want a simple way to stay up to date with the podcast? Click subscribe on whichever platform you're listening on, and if you have the time, leave us a review. It helps us grow the podcast. We've got episodes on shows like Avatar: The Last Airbender coming up in the next few months. You can also find us on Instagram or Facebook, so feel free to drop a line and say hi if you have thoughts or questions for us. Until next time, this has been Kill the Cat. Is this just us being Kronk when we sing our own theme song?
I think it is.
Yes.
Okay, we always cut out before we get to this bit, but like generally to like round ourselves off, we sing our own theme song. We go ba da 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 da. And that's what you missed on Kill a Cat.